Do you believe these large, unexplainable structures were created by extraterrestrials?
It depends on how you define extraterrestrial.
How were the crop circles created?
The consciousness that's behind the real phenomenon also once existed here on Earth in physical form, and they were called the Watchers, and they addressed themselves that way. Their nickname was the Shining Ones. If you go back to the end of the Ice Age, pre-Sumeria, by the way, you'll find these people appearing all around the world under different names. They're called the followers of Horus in Egypt. They are the Vedic conscious in South America. In Central America, they're known as Kukulkan, Itzamna, and Quetzalcoatl. They're part of the same group of people.
What is the next biggest shift you see coming for human society?
We're in the middle of it right now. So the big shift is about
Freddy Silva, thanks so much for being here, bro.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Freddy, what is the greatest lie people believe about themselves that creates the most confusion in today's society?
I think it depends on the individual, doesn't it? I think people can believe whatever they want. The biggest one in terms of generalized thinking for me would be organized religion. I have nothing against believing in something greater than yourself, and you should do, because we don't understand the universe, but the way that it's been projected as a tool of repression and hypocrisy, in my opinion, and in my experience as well, that probably is the most dangerous thing in the planet right now. I think we should find something that we believe in internally and follow that passion and let it lead us, and establish a direct relationship with whatever it is that you're trying to follow that makes you a better person. And I think it's for a recovering Catholic, that's worked very well for me, by the way.
From your perception, what is the origin or origins of the gods or the God?
Oh, I think we don't know. I don't think we ever will until we die and go off into the next level of reality and find out all the bits and pieces of the truth. And I think Plato and Pythagoras would back me up on this one, because they said exactly the same thing 2,500 years ago. And they spent a lot of time going into places of initiation to leave the body in a controlled manner, where they have a kind of an altered state of consciousness, but an induced near-death experience. And when they came back into the body several days later, they said, no, the only place to find the truth about anything is when you leave the body and go to the other world and then come back. And then from my research, I've also found, talking to many ancient people around the planet, in South America, in Australia, in Asia, they said the origin of the gods was at one point from Orion, which surprised the hell out of me. And I said, do you mean that as a metaphor? And they said, no, physically at one point a long time ago, which could be anywhere between 10 to 100,000 years ago. We just don't know. They said, no, originally all the gods came from Orion, and they eventually settled here. And by the time we get to the end of the Ice Age, we as hunter-gatherers begin to take over from their culture. We have a decline of the gods for various reasons, and then the rise of the human settlement across the face of the earth. And I've also heard it say in the Pacific that at one point, humans also came from the belt stars of Orion themselves, which is something that the Hopi also agree with. I found that to be an incredible conversation about the origins of things.
So the pyramids are aligned to Orion's belt.
Exactly.
Correct? And I just recorded yesterday with Filippo Biondi, who's the guy that discovered the cylinders going down beneath many, I believe hundreds of feet below the pyramids, and then they attach into these 80 meter by 80 meter by 80 meter chambers below. And the suggestion is that the pyramids are like a portal of sorts. And that the intention of is to create coherence with the universe. And when you can create coherence with the universe, you can potentially be able to perhaps leave your body, astral project, access infinite information, things of the sort. What do you think about all that? I'm filling in a lot of blanks right now, by the way. I'm taking a stab at it. But it's interesting that they're tied to the Orion's belt, and you're suggesting that humanity originates from Orion's belt. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's not the only temple on the face of the earth that has that alignment. Many of the ancient megaliths also are aligned to Orion's belt. Göbekli Tepe also has its main alignment to the first rising of Orion's belt. And there's a place in New Zealand which is called, and I'm not joking, the birthplace of the gods. And I've been there 6 times, and that's also aligned to Orion's belt. So there's something going on here. In terms of the pyramids of Egypt, if you've been there as many times as I have, I've been there now 28 times. And in fact, I'm leading yet another tour in October. You come to realize that all 3 pyramids, the 3 main pyramids, they're all doing 3 different things. And yes, they are a mirror of the belt, but they each do individual things. So, for example, the middle pyramid, when you go into the inside chambers, it's very disappointing. You feel very grounded, as if you're expecting a major out-of-body experience, and you won't get it. It's a very grounding place. It's a very constructive and yet practical building. If you go to the Little Pyramid, which is where all interesting things happen, in my opinion, and the most interesting of all of them is the Little Pyramid, you get the sense that someone's doing a lot of thinking in there. But the shamanic experience is in the Great Pyramid. Okay. And this has been going on in terms of anecdotal information for hundreds of years. I've been collating this for a long, long time. And then I came across the grandmothers, the elder grandmothers of a tribe who used to live in Easter Island 12,000 years ago. They now live in New Zealand as well. And they were saying that the tribe has 3 baskets, and each of those baskets represents each of the belt stars of Orion. And when they actually reference it to which of the gods those baskets of knowledge are related to and the stars that they represent, and they tell you the qualities of the gods that go into the knowledge of the baskets, they represent the 3 pyramids of Giza and how people feel inside them. So on one level, it is absolutely correct, but there's one pyramid above all the other 3 where you have that shamanic experience, and that's exactly the place that everybody goes to, which is the King's Chamber and the box in the King's Chamber, which I will point out, it's in the wrong location in the room, but under the right circumstances, you can still leave the body, and people still do when they go in there, which has its own particular peculiarities, because leaving the body in a shamanic state in the King's Chamber is easy. Anybody can do that. The problem is coming back into the body, and that's what takes years of practice. And many people have done this. They'll pay $15,000, which is the current going rate for having the building to yourself for an evening. And they'll leave the body, and they'll come back in the morning, and they are completely altered, completely changed, just like they used to do in the temples in Greece as well. But then there are those cases every few years where people go in there doing the same thing, not knowing the protocol and the procedure or the planning. And when they open up the building in the morning, there's a dead guy inside the box, because finding your way back into your body is the hard part. And the Egyptians had 437 phrases that took you 3 years to remember in order to find your way to the other world and find your way back. And they would use it in certain places like the King's Chamber, and also in the Pyramid of Saqqara. It was also used for that. And the little one of Unas, which few people go to in Saqqara, that was definitely used for that protocol. And you can see the instructions on the wall to this very day.
What is the consistent metaphor or maybe literal act or experience across various different traditions of death and rebirth and resurrection? Is it this? Is it something else? Are there different iterations or versions of resurrection?
Oh, the virgin or the divine bride is the woman that you marry or that you are chemically wedded to when you've completed this journey. And it happens in every culture across the planet. The Templars were one of the last people who actually practiced this, which is why they were protecting the lineage of Mary Magdalene, who embodies that teaching. And they said that, and the Greeks were also doing this 2,000 years ago, and they said that when you actually are an initiate and you do the out-of-body journey and you travel to the other world and you hang out there for 3 days, and this is not a shamanic thing, this is your soul has actually left the body for 3 days, very dangerous. And they said that you actually discover all the knowledge in the universe that you care to think about. And when you do that, you are set to marry a divine bride or a divine woman or a cosmic woman, because she embodies the essence of all the knowledge in the universe. And it took me a few years to get my head around this. And it turns out that a long, long time ago, in order to teach people who don't understand these metaphors well, they came up with this concept of embodying this in a woman whose skin is black. Not because she comes from Africa necessarily, but because they reasoned in the beginning there was the void of the universe where this creative force, God, Allah, whatever you want to call it, created everything. And in order to create everything, it had to know everything. So all the knowledge of the universe existed at the Big Bang, as the scientists call it. I think women have a much gentler phrase for that, which is the mild birthing of the goddess. It's a much easier way to describe the creation of things rather than with a Big Bang. And so someone reasoned that in the beginning, all the universe, the knowledge was there in the universe in the dark, before light, before sound, before people, before planets. So how do we teach this to illiterate people? Oh, I know. Because the universe is expansive and is giving birth, we shall depict it as a woman who has black skin, because the black skin depicts the darkness of the universe. And she, as a pregnant female, embodies all that knowledge. So that when you and I do this in real life, if you complete the journey successfully, you know because you've married the divine bride. And you'll see this in the Grail story that the Templars were involved with, where at the end of the story, the initiate has overcome 12 obstacles. He's sitting at the table, and in comes this beautiful woman holding this tray with the Grail on the tray, which is a cup, which represents the drinking of divine knowledge. So the cup, the tray, and the woman come together. He is now presented with that because he can drink of the knowledge, and he marries the divine bride. So it's a very romantic way of looking at the situation. So if you have married a divine bride, that's a symbol that you've actually achieved the journey and can tell to live the tale.
From your perspective, what are humans doing here on this planet? It seems like a great story and journey to have death and resurrection and go on a journey and access wisdom and information. And what is the function of all of that? Or is it just to keep on going in circles with this human experience? Like, what are we actually doing with all of this?
Right now, messing it up quite well, as we tend to do over time. But no, I think people come here to have the greatest adventure of all. And again, this is a story not just from my personal perspective, but if you talk to every ancient shamanic culture on the planet that's still alive, they'll say exactly the same thing, that we're on a cyclical journey, not a journey that starts here and ends up there. That's Western way of thinking. In the old traditions, everything is done in the round or the spiral, the ever-expanding spiral. And the idea is that you have had millions and millions of experiences and millions of incarnations in different levels of reality on many, many planets. And in fact, when I was working with a channeler in England who works with the police and has a 99.9% success rate of solving crimes, the source that's coming through her was saying exactly the same thing. That forget about the number of times that you've incarnated because it'll drive you crazy. Humans have no number for this. And to which I asked, well, what's the point? And the point is to have the experience, because in physical form, your soul has deeper experiences than at any other level of reality. So down here, we can have a taste sensation which is much more tangible. Sex is much more tangible. Driving a car, breathing oxygen, eating food, any experience where it's love or pain and everything in between is much more intense. Now, you have that in the other world for sure, but not to the same degree when you have a light body. So people like us actually choose to come down in physical form from time to time to have an experience. And the point is to move the experience and the development of your original soul. So it's a very selfish experience, but at the same time, because you're sharing the planet with now 9 billion people, it's also a shared experience where you try to contribute to the upward movement and mobility of the human race. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's a cyclical thing. But there is, over the last 5,000-6,000 years, a slow, gradual progress towards an upper momentum of improving the human condition. And it's a slow progress, but that's how it's always been. So the ultimate idea is when you finally die physically is to go back into the other world as a soul and take the experience that you gathered here and say, yes, I think I know I've improved myself, or I could have done that better, or I should go back and redo that because I've really made a real balls up over it. But the point is, you're not judged for it. You have to judge yourself and how well or how poorly you've done. But at the same time, no experience has been thrown away. Every experience is valid because it helps you to grow as an individual. And they said during the channeling session, that's the whole point of life. It's very profound and yet paradoxically very disappointing because, the meaning of life is to have an experience. To which, of course, the answer is, well, what happens when you have so many experiences? Well, at that point, you become a guide to other souls that are coming in who are just born into the universe. So we're talking here, having this conversation right now, Aaron. One day we'll have so many experiences that we'll be gods in our own right, showing other souls how to come down here and have the experience. It's quite a big picture to take in, and it's a very important one. So like all great ideas, it's also a very simple concept to take in.
I'd like to take a moment and share a word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Huel. I'm a fan of Huel. They have saved my butt on many a trip. They are a high-protein, nutritionally complete bag of deliciousness. They contain 27 vitamins and minerals, 40 grams of protein, which is huge. So I can throw this into a shaker bottle or into a cup. It mixes actually absurdly well, which is a cool thing. I'm genuinely very surprised. If you try it out, you will see how well it mixes. It's actually kind of strange and amazing. I like these guys a lot. They're very convenient. They've saved my butt many a times. And literally just a couple weeks ago, I was at a hotel. Everything was closed. I had a few of these in my bag, and it was incredibly helpful. So I think that they are delicious. I like the ingredients inside these things. They feel very nutritionally complete to me. And you guys can get yourself a discount as well. So there's a limited time offer. You can make healthy eating simple. Get Huel today with my exclusive offer of 15% off online with my code Align15. So you go to Huel.com/Align15. Huel is spelled HUEL.com, code Align15. New customers only. Thank you to Huel for partnering and supporting the show. Is it the same energy or consciousness or entity or extraterrestrial or people that created the Stonehenge, as crop circles, as pyramids, as these various different ancient sites? We have these megalithic sites around the world. Crop circles wouldn't be considered that. Is there an association or connection between all of these places, or are they happening separately?
They're all connected, and it took me 30 years to work it out. You think that they'd find someone a bit quicker-minded to do this, but it takes a lot of time to research and make the connection. 30 years ago, I wrote my first book called Secrets in the Fields. It's still the best-selling book on the crop circle phenomenon because it has all the science behind it as well. What's real, what's fake. I just didn't understand that the consciousness that's behind the real phenomenon also once existed here on Earth in physical form, and they were called the Watchers, and they addressed themselves that way. Their nickname was the Shining Ones. And you do, if you go back to the end of the Ice Age, to pre-Sumeria, by the way, you'll find these people appearing all around the world under different names. They're called the followers of Horus in Egypt. They are the Viracochas in South America, and so on. In Central America, they're known as Kukulkan, Itzamna, and Quetzalcoatl. They're part of the same group of people. Their other nickname was the People of the Serpent, and it has nothing to do with reptiles, by the way. It's to do with the understanding of the manipulation of energy, which behaves like serpents when it flows through the landscape. And back in the day, when we were much more ethereal as thinkers and as light bodies, you could basically communicate telepathically or with simple language. But as things became progressively much more complicated, we had to start building things. So big stones, like you find in Carnac in France, 39-foot tall standing megaliths, which basically, I'm 6'5", and even I look like a tiny little fly next to this enormous stone. And at one point, this whole area around northern France resembled a forest of stone. They were everywhere. There were over 100 50,000 megaliths in this part of the world alone. And you think, why? Well, if you look at the crop circles and how they're created, and the megaliths and how they're now positioned on the landscape, and how things like the pyramids and Stonehenge and so forth are created, they come from the same construction manual. It's to do with the manipulation of the local laws of nature, which is telluric currents, which is what we call, some people call them ley lines, which are not the same thing, by the way. These are the lines of electricity and magnetism that flow naturally through the landscape like serpents. And then you have gravity, which is a very not well understood concept. And all of these temples also occupy places where the gravitational fields is a little bit weaker, which allows the soul to escape the pull of gravity for a brief moment. And that is to do with the process of initiation and also astral journeying. This is why these places are very important in that tradition. So there is a connection. And when I started looking at the people that were behind the construction of these monuments, once you go around the world and connect the dots, they are the same group of people living from era to era under different names. So it's like a parallel civilization, if you like, that originally used to be in physical form. Whether we call them Watchers, Shining Ones, Anunnaki, Followers of Horus, same group of people doing exactly the same thing. And the purpose was to take the energy of the earth, concentrate it in these monuments, and then allow a person that enters the monument or is in the vicinity of the monument to be influenced by that energy. And it allows you, under a certain state of grace, to connect with another level of reality. And that's why there's this lingering folklore around all of these sites, including crop circles, by the way, where people are either having instant visions or sudden inspiration or altered states of consciousness, and also spontaneous healings as well. That covers all of those areas. So all of these things are connected. And again, it goes back to the development of the human condition. So we can forget about our problems just for a few hours and realize that there's a much bigger picture going on here, that we're much more in control than we give ourselves credit for. That's what it comes down to in a nutshell. It's the fact that we've become to realize the power that we have as humans and how we can apply that power to empower ourselves and also make the place a much better place to live. And we tend to forget that. It kind of goes back to religion that I started earlier. There's a relationship between that and religion, but then religion over the thousands of years gets corrupted by dogma, and then it becomes propaganda. But faith, in its original tradition, that's what it all goes back to. The manipulation of the laws of the earth in order to help you discover who you really are and what your purpose is here.
Do you believe these megalithic sites on planet Earth are extraterrestrials responsible for the creation? Are humans extraterrestrials? Who's responsible for it?
Oh, well, it depends on how you define extraterrestrial. Or aliens, it means it's something for very, very different things for different people. Yes, we have had help from people who come from somewhere else. If I bring up the Hopi, for example, talking about extraterrestrials to the Hopi is no big deal. You can sit down, have a nice meal, and they don't even blink an eye when you talk about this, because they said, and the Zuni also talk about this, they said, yeah, they come here every month. They arrive here in their flying shields, which is their description of spaceships. And we are connected to them from a long, long time ago. They helped us move from a sinking island in the middle of the Pacific to where we live now in Arizona. So for us, it's no big deal. And they're the ones that lay down the rules of manifestation, the rules of sacred space, and we're following those rules. So in the beginning, yes, we were getting a lot of help from the outside. But by this time, these people that we call the gods or extraterrestrials were actually living here among us, and they form a parallel civilization. And every ancient culture talks about this as well. They call them, in fact, they describe them as human-like, but not quite human. Great phrase. And eventually, we picked up from that idea and recognized that this help was now getting lesser and lesser, because this ancient civilization was dying off bit by bit. It wasn't easy to intermarry with human beings because we're a very different DNA, and it caused all kinds of problems. So at one point, and I want to say about 2000 BC, all of these things that we see around the world in terms of the passage mounds, Stonehenge and so forth, were built by very exceptional human beings who literally understood the laws of nature and also how to move those laws along and connect with the laws and get them to do the work for you. So one of the most incredible stories that I found is the recurring association between moving large rocks and sound. And I thought, okay, maybe it's just folklore or a legend. But when you hear it again on different continents by different people, you begin to realize these people that came up with this folklore must have experienced this at some level because it's consistent. And I wrote this in my second book, and I put my neck out there a little bit. At the same time, Princeton University, they have their own little department called the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Department, where they actually look at that brown line between science and mysticism and what binds the two together. What can we find in this little gray area of research? And they did exactly what I do, which is look at ancient people and how you'd move megaliths. And I always said it's to do with the amount of quartz in the stone, a specific type of quartz. Well, they picked up exactly the same information. And they published a peer-reviewed journal. In fact, they even have a video of this experiment, which does show a piece of crystal inside a tube in their laboratory in Princeton. And they start throwing sounds at the actual piece of quartz in the tube. And there's a moment in the video where the quartz actually lifts off the actual table. So they discovered the levitation of an object using sound. So this comes from a very old technology that were given to us by what we call the gods. And then after a while, we humans picked up on that and were able to do it ourselves. Now, we've lost that technology, of course, because today trying to move in one of those, even a 30-ton stone, requires 50 people with wooden rollers. And when you go to these locations and you look at, these scientists, dragging these things on wooden rollers, you see how pathetic the whole thing is. Yeah, you can do it for about 50 feet, but try going up and down hills, over rivers, through forests, and challenging terrain. That means that, it would have taken a lot of people, a lot of time, and a lot of resources just to put up one stone, which could be anywhere between 100 to 1,100 tons. That changes the whole characteristic. So the answer to the question is both were involved in making the temples.
How were the crop circles created?
Oh, we could be here for a long, long time. To cut a very long story short, and by the way, and most of the real ones are no longer here, by the way. It's mostly man-made now, unfortunately. Humans are great at destroying something so sacred. But in the beginning, in the first few years, it was a very, very sacred thing before, the story of Doug and Dave comes along, who, by the way, were actually invented by the British Ministry of, it's called MI5. And we actually tracked it down to a fictitious press agency that was created to, make these two guys look like they'd made every single crop circle on the face of the earth. And the story was preposterous and it was basically debunked. But before they show up, there was a real phenomenon. This is now back in the 80s and the 90s. And the crop circles have been happening, by the way, for much, much longer than that. In South Africa, they've been appearing for thousands of years, by the way. And they're still revered as the circles of the gods. That's what they call them down there. So the difference between the man-made and the real stuff is in the real phenomenon, nothing is damaged. The plants are just laid down. They're bent at the base. They hover about 2 inches above the soil. They're steamed into place. And we have 80 eyewitnesses around the world that show them literally being created by a beam of light. And the crop rotates, no matter how big the crop circle and how complex it is, in less than 15 seconds. And the only thing that's ever seen is a beam of light coming down from the sky. Boom, that's it, and it disappears. It changes the molecular structure of the crop. It changes the rhythm of the crop as well. So if you leave the plants alone, the plants come back up to the 90 degrees, but they start growing faster than the crop around it. So there's a fertilizing influence, which is due to the sound frequency that's hidden inside that beam. There's a connection with sound again that links it to sites made of stone, like Stonehenge. And this also alters the structure of the soil. It dehydrates the soil and it creates these metal spheroids that you find in the ground that when you analyze the soil, it looks like it's been baked at 1500 degrees Celsius. Now, there's nothing on earth or no technology that we know of that can do that unless you use a microwave oven to do that to the plants and the soil in a fraction of a second. And of course, no alien or any human is going to go into a wheat field with a little microwave and suddenly microwave the plant and the soil. You can't do that. But what's happening is that within 1.5 seconds, the process takes place, and that's been proven in laboratories as well. That, in a nutshell, is how they're created. And going back to my friend, the channeler in England, who inadvertently channeled the source of crop circles before they began appearing in the south of England, I can almost remember the channeling. It was back in 87, and they said, we are going to show you in 7 days of Earth time signs of our existence. We will be laying down these symbols across the face of the Earth near these sacred sites to show you who we are and what we're doing. There'll be messages in these symbols. There were symbols that will be used for healing. There will be a technical imprint for a device that will help you get yourselves away from fossil fuels. And there also will be a warning and mathematical equations. And in 20 years later, all of those things came to pass, by the way. And it started the channeling. And at the very end, they said, we are the people of the light. We are called watchers. We used to come in physical form many, many years ago in human history. And then we stopped. And this is very funny. We got tired of being crucified. So now we communicate with the human race through symbols, simple symbols, which attract the attention and will be also attracting scientists to make sure that people and the human race will evolve to its next level of consciousness, because we got ourselves into this, this dead end of civilization. And we can see it all around. Climate change is just one aspect of what's going on right now. And basically they're saying we can only watch. We can't directly intervene in the development of the human race. That's up for you to do. That's the whole point of incarnating on Earth. But sometimes the humanity gets itself in such a deadlock and in such a black and white situation that they need outside assistance. So we are suggesting what you should be doing to get yourselves out of this and go on to your next stage of evolution. And the good news is that we're about that far away from hitting that critical mass. So the fact that we're surrounded by so much chaos right now is actually a very good sign that these things are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is getting you to live outside of your comfort zone and challenging the perception and the ideas that we've held on to for the last 2,000 years, which have got us into this situation. And the result of that is chaos. Some people are beginning to change the system. Some people are holding on to the old pattern, and that's what creates that black and white movement in the human race right now. So that's a very good thing from a scientific point of view, because a scientist would say, well, the greater the amount of chaos, the greater the potential jump to a new level of order. And that's been true of every single change in human existence in the last 12,000 years. Whenever we're faced with total catastrophe and a meltdown, we suddenly pick up and go, wait a minute, we can do better than this. And we evolve into that next stage. So in the ashes of, destruction or potential destruction, we're seeing already the seed, the germination of new ideas that will get us to the next stage of evolution. So it's a very positive thing that's happening right now.
I'd like to take a moment and share a word from our sponsor. I am very excited about this sponsor. I sincerely mean that. This is Aqua Omega. It is wild-caught fish oil. This is not a supplement. This is a real food. I think that this is one of the most nutrient-dense, healthy things you can do for your brain, for your heart, for your connective tissue, for your eyes, for your nails, for your longevity. Fish oil, baby. Little fish are very valuable. They are going to be less contaminated than what you'd be getting from eating larger fish. This specific oil goes through a particular distillment process, so you don't get the fish burps that people get sometimes. It tastes genuinely sincere, like I want it to stay on my tongue, which is pretty rare with a fish oil. I think it's great. I cannot say enough good things about it. And if you guys want to try it yourself, you can get 20% off. You go to myaquaomega.com/align for 20% off. That's myaquaomega.com/align. You'll get 20% off. You will not be disappointed. They also have capsules and all different other things. I think they're great. Truly, sincerely, get 20% off. Improve your heart and your brain and your longevity and everything. Try Aqua Omega. Do you believe human evolution in the way that we know it is BS or legit?
No, I think we're so caught up in the forest that we don't see the trees anymore. When you sort of look further away, and this is something the mystics tend to do and initiates tend to do, most people live a daily life of cause and effect. Now, if you follow the tradition of mystical teaching and you practice that over the years, and I like to think I'm one of those people. I still haven't absolutely perfected it, but I'm still alive. I have time. But my position over 30 years has changed so much from my understanding of the work that I do and the work that I publish, which you see the bigger picture. And I see that the bigger point of evolution is to go through periods of time, usually around 2,600 year periods, which just happens to coincide with the mini cycles in the state of precession. We call these the signs of the zodiac, by the way, which is why they are there. And every time we go through a new sign of the zodiac, it asks the human race to go through another experience. Okay. And when you reach the point where you go from one stage to the next, there's always that sort of butting of heads. There's always a lot of warfare, a lot of black and white thinking, the lack of any discernment and the gray area where we should be looking at, because that gray area is where it gets us to debate about the bigger picture of life. And now trying to have a debate with anyone about the bigger pictures of life ends up acrimoniously on, online social media and all of that. So every sort of 2,000 years or so, we go through this experience, and then we reach a point where we've gone through the entire experience, and now we are basically polluting that experience. We've corrupted the experience just in time for the next 2,000 years of experience. So this is a very measurable cyclical system that we see in human development. And I do believe, if you're aware of it, that the human consciousness does go in these blocks of development, and then it gets himself into this recess of a dead end, and then it moves on to the next experience, and it experiences a resurgence. For example, in around 1666, where the whole of Europe and most of the world is suffering from from Black Death and plague, and in fact it took out a third of the human population. The germ that started in the Black Death and all those horrible things that came with it was the Renaissance and all the wonderful things that came out of the Renaissance. New thinking, revolution in France, which went from despotic government to democracy and so forth. So you see how suddenly when humanity is faced with a complete blockage, suddenly there are seeds in that blockage that germinate into a new set of ideas. And that survived another 300 years, and here we are again, questioning our very existence. And from here, in the next decade, we will suddenly see that we cannot go on as we have before. We have to evolve into a new level of understanding. So again, it's about the constant evolution, the slow movement of evolution. The point is, don't lose heart, because we've been here before. We've been in worst case scenarios before, and we've always survived. We always end up with a better model at the end of it.
This is a slightly sidetracking question, so perhaps I apologize in advance. Is there any association with what you're saying with Hindu cosmology and the yugas and the cycles of time that people are going through? And are they accessing similar? Is extraterrestrial appropriate to label the watchers, or you call them the shiny ones? Is that the term?
The shining ones is one of their nicknames.
What is the best noun that I can utilize to be able to create a connection in my mind of what the watchers are? Is extraterrestrial appropriate? Or is it an energy? Or is it an entity? How do I understand that?
It's extraterrestrial insofar as it's not anywhere near the Earth, and yet paradoxically it's very close to the Earth too. It's another level of reality. And the way that it was explained to me is that it's very difficult for humans to get their head around the three-dimensional state. They said, we're actually we're in the room next door. We're not that far away from you. It's like the best analogy is the radio station. We're operating at 90 FM on the physical department. But if you just move the dial to 90.5 FM, you're on a different level of reality. It's very real in its level of reality, but it's not tangible and physical like ours is. But in their point of view, it's absolutely real. So it's not that far away. It's not way out there. It's pretty much just around us, just another way of thinking. If you work with subtle energy, and anyone who's psychic or does Tai Chi or even Pilates understands, or even yoga understands, when you go for that movement of energy around your body, you become much more aware of things around your immediate environment, the people next to you, the people behind you. Your visual cortex is much more expanded. You can hear a lot more sound when you move your energy field. That's what you're tapping into. It's not that far away. It's right next to you. But when we tend to think of physical terms, we tend to think of us and extraterrestrial. Yes, but extraterrestrial also embodies other levels of non-physical reality. So you have to sort of expand your thinking to embrace this concept.
Yeah, the issue in the question would be that my instrumentation or my tool of perception, if I'm kind of stuck or focused with my lens in the three-dimensional kind of geographical distance-based lens, then I probably won't be able to perceive interdimensional. Perhaps it's like another instrumentation of perception.
Absolutely. You have to be much more superphysical. In fact, I have a very simple technique which I teach people when I take them on to tours to sacred sites, suddenly I stop the bus and I go, can you name 10 sounds that you heard in the last 15 minutes? If you can get past 3 sounds, you're doing pretty well. I said, right, we're going to get off the bus. I know there's a big temple over there. I want you to go walking for half an hour. Just go walking. And we could be in the middle of the desert, okay? I said, I want you to just go for a walk and be aware of all the sounds that you can hear. We'll meet at the entrance to that temple in 30 minutes. And we get there and people are starting to take their cameras. I said, put the camera away. Now, can you tell me 10 sounds that you heard during your walk in the middle of the desert in the last 30 minutes? And they can't stop talking. You can even hear a dog scratching his fleas off 15 feet away. That's how quickly your body becomes adaptable. And I said, yeah, that's the first clue that your body is now becoming super physical and you're becoming psychically aware of the environment around you. You are now channeling the world around you. So this physical body can actually extend its sense of awareness and encompass so much more information. And after that, you can start developing the next technique, which is name 10 things that you saw in the last 15 minutes. Now, if you can do that every day, you suddenly become much more super sensitive and you can sense things on a very subtle level. I can even tell you what time it is without having a watch down to the minute. I know what people are thinking in the wall behind me. I can hear people walking down the street from this interview, 15 feet away, because I'm focused on that. My awareness is expanded. If you can do that every day, believe me, you can become psychic very quickly, because the next stage from that, you can see people walking through your living room that are no longer physical, but they are real in a level of reality. Very simple test, but very useful. And yes, you can get the winning lottery numbers. And yes, it's been done many, many times. And yes, I've won the lottery so many times, but you know what? It's not part of my actual experience to win the lottery to become rich. I have to work hard for my living. So I will keep guessing the lottery numbers correctly. And the next day when I check, after I go into a store and buy a ticket with the numbers that I just intuited, and someone will actually come into the room and say, Freddy, haven't seen you in ages. How are you doing? So I'm doing pretty well. How are you? How are your travels? And then I give the guy behind the counter $1 for my ticket, and the gate closed because it's now 7:05 and the lottery is shut down. And I've lost another $5 million. So this is just the universe's way of saying, yes, you can do this, but you know what? You weren't meant to be rich because of the lottery. You were meant to work hard in this lifetime. I'm just putting it out there that anything is possible, just using your God-given ability with the essence that you have living with you right now.
Can you share about the story of the Great Flood and when that happened, what incited the Great Flood? I'd like to take a moment and share a word from a sponsor that I'm outstandingly excited about. I chew gum all the freaking time. This is Laurine Co. Remineralizing Gum. It is a way to make gum chewing, which I do it because it's good for my brain, helps me think better. I like it for training. I like chewing something called mastic gum, which is what this contains, which comes from the sap of a tree in Greece. Pretty cool stuff. It's actually good for your teeth, and it's helpful for strengthening your jaw and also chiseling your jawline. This also contains something called nanohydroxyapatite. If you are privy in the health space or the dental space, you have heard of this before. It remineralizes your teeth. So this is therapeutic gum in every single way. Something I don't like about gum is I don't like the weird juices that are inside of gums, and I just don't trust most gums. This is a gum that I can actually trust. I would highly recommend it, and you guys get 50% off. I think it is crazy if you don't try this because 50% off. It's like kind of wild. The code is buylaurine.com/align for mother freaking 50% off. I really think you guys should try this. I genuinely, sincerely mean that. Grab this stuff. Buylaurine, BUYLARINE.com/align. I think you'll like this a lot. They got a lot of great flavors. It tastes good. I chew it all day. Check it out. Get 50% off.
Oh, I've got some pictures of that. No, I'm just joking. I was there. Yes, I can actually. And it comes from a very interesting guy called Ur-Anu, who himself was present at the actual meeting about the flood 200 years before it actually happened. You may know him by his Hebrew name, Enoch. And he left a very interesting book. So his real name was Ur-Anu. He was one of the Anunnaki, the people of the sky god Anu. And not many people know this, but the original Ethiopian version, which was translated about 120 years ago into English, is very, very, very good. And he talks about Ur-Anu being in council as a scribe to write this down so that humans could learn about this after the event. And it's an agonizing story. And to cut a very long story short, the Lords of Anu had got together in council, and they brought in the Watchers, who were in physical form at that time. And the Watchers were the go-betweens between the Lords of Anu and human beings. The idea was that they could only influence hunter-gatherers, as we were at the time. The Watchers would give information to hunter-gatherers or something like, oh, if you match those two strands of wheat together and you plant them in the ground and you water it, and then you crush the seeds with a big stone, you get flour and you can make bread. And the hunter-gatherers said, oh, that's very useful. Thank you very much. And they would turn around and the Watchers were gone, disappeared, because they only want to interact with humans subtly. They want to let us develop in our own potential. We came here to have the experience. If you get the gods to do the work for you, it's of no use for you whatsoever. But there was one small group of Watchers, and it's always the small group that gets all the attention, who decided to mate with humans and have babies, and they taught them the art of fighting and how to use weapons, and it completely distorted the human race. And they got into a lot of trouble with the Anunnaki because of that, because they said, no, we cannot interfere in the development of the human race. We can only assist and let them get on with it. So the story is missing. Don't let me hold that thought for a second. It's a very complicated story. The idea was that they were not supposed to give humans the instructions of things that would actually devalue the human race. So the small group of Watchers are herded in by the other Watchers, people like Uriel, Gabriel, Michael, who become the guardian angels of the Catholic Church, by the way. This is where the story gets polluted. So there's a story written by Ur-Anu who says, Gabriel walks into the room and says, look, we don't have the manpower to reel in the bastard offspring of the Watchers, who are the real problem, the Nephilim, which means the children of Orion. And I said, they're the real problem. They are basically breeding like rabbits. The planet is being overtaken by groups of very, very tall people who are covered with red hair, and they are cannibals. They are completely crazy. They can't adapt to the human gene at all. We do not have the manpower to bring this in. The planet Earth will be ruled by these horrible creatures called the Nephilim. And that's when the story in the room, you can almost hear the the air being sucked out of the room. And I went, oh God, is this where this is really going? And Emet Ut Anu writes it down, that the Anu said, we're going to have to wipe out the earth. We're going to have to create this flood, which we will do by using our ability to move large objects in the sky called meteorites. We'll make the meteorites fall into the ocean, create these enormous tidal waves, which will give the illusion of a flood. And basically, that's the story that we end up with in every culture on the planet. That the 90% of the human race was wiped out by all these massive tsunami, which, by the way, penetrated into Tibet and Nepal, and also through the Cascade mountain range of North America. There's tribes out there that still remember that. And they said in the meeting, they said in the meeting with the Lords of Anu, we don't want to do this, but we'll have to save the human race, we will have to destroy the planet, and then some of us will have to volunteer to stay behind in groups to then administer to the survivors of the human race to help the human race bring themselves back up again. And that's where we inherit the stories about 11,000 years ago of groups of gods in groups of 7 with one charismatic leader, with one woman who carries the bloodline of the gods. They appear at strategic locations around the earth, and those are the places where the oldest temples are and where the oldest stories happen to be, including with the Yuga cycle in India of how humans discovered civilization. Was that part of your question?
That's amazing. I was just going to say specificity of the time frame of the Great Flood, but so the Great Flood and the Younger Dryas period are one and the same thing. The transition where some big cataclysmic thing happened, wiped everything out. When from your perception was human society the most advanced technologically speaking?
Oh, it depends on your what you call technology. I mean, someone who can lift 1,000-ton rock and put it upright in a temple, that's technology. We can't do that today. Whereas today, I think the ancients would laugh at us that, we are basically beholden to a little black rectangle about this big that we're stuck to every single day. And they said, yeah, you can get all the information on your cell phone, but it's made people more stupid. And I have to agree with them. Because the tool that is used to communicate and get information is now being abused as well. So the technology is relative to your level of development. So I would say that today we're poorer for technology because so many people that I see walking around, they don't even know that by looking at a certain way that the clouds are moving, there's a big thunderstorm coming. I don't need my little black rectangle to tell me that there's a storm coming because I learned about the way the clouds, the design of clouds. When I was at school in London, when I was 12, they said, yeah, if this cloud looks like this, there's massive amounts of rain coming. If the cloud looks like this, there's high wind coming. If the cloud is like this, there's a drought coming. And that's what's called mindfulness. Their technology was mindfulness. They're aware of the laws of the earth. They could move the laws of the earth. To an Aboriginal person in the Australian outback, which is basically a lifeless desert, or so it seems, they could walk in the middle of the desert and go, if I turn right here and walk for 30 miles, I will come to the next sacred site. And they will do so. And there's a 90% accuracy rate by you being mindful of the Earth's natural currents of energy. You'll find a way to an oasis or a sacred site. Now, if you do that today, you basically start at a Walmart parking lot. You end up, probably at the Uber parking lot. And then you have to get your phone out to find out what the hell you're doing. So their level of technology compared to ours is much greater because they learned how to survive because they knew what the earth was doing. They could protect themselves and they could also foresee future events. They were very psychic. So that to me is a high level of technology. And it was only around 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. If you go to Central America today, there are still people in Guatemala that use that technology, that natural mindfulness to know and survive. Where today you plonk someone from LA in the middle of Guatemala and they will not be able to how to even grow wheat or even pluck the right fruit without killing themselves and eating poisonous fruit. So again, technology for me is relative. We are at the high point of technology in terms of the physicality of things and computerization. But also the technology that's helping us is also driving part of society to become even more lazy and more stupid than it's ever been. So there is that paradox in society. So that's how I see it.
So my intuition says that the technology of past that still is accessible in the present, but the technology of past was a technology of coherence. And they were able to create coherence or exist in coherence instead of creating, or whatever language. They were able to exist within coherence with the earth and the elements and the universe and all things. If a system can exist within coherence, then it has access to the entirety of the system.
Exactly.
If a system breaks out of coherence, becomes incoherent, it exists in a space of noise and distortion.
Yeah.
Noise and distortion are synonymous with dis-ease.
Yeah.
We, as a species, presently are existing atop of Earth, and we're building atop of Earth. At one point in history, we were coherent with these energetic lines and these, the energies in the fields within the Earth and the universe. I believe that is the difference in the technology. When we're building technology atop of distortion, trying to mimic the coherence that we once had and the technology that manifested as a product of that coherence.
I think that's nicely said, yes. And that's the reason why we created sacred spaces around the world. We went on a big temple building binge about 9,000 years ago, and we haven't stopped. Well, we stopped about 2,000 years ago, or when organized religion took over and warfare took over the human race. This warfare thing's only been around for about 2,500 years, really. We were actually getting along quite well before that, and there's very few signs of warfare before that. But the reason why we built temples on such a massive scale, and we've now discovered this. In fact, my new documentary called Megalith, ironically, actually discusses the science behind megaliths. And it tells you that these places are habiting places on the planet which open up a little portal for you. And you go into these places. Let's say you go to an Egyptian temple or Avebury Stone Circle in England or one of the Passage Mounds in France. It's the same technology. They inhabit certain environments where the laws of nature have been manipulated to get you to cross into a new environment. And if you just open yourself to the possibility, you don't have to believe a word I'm saying. Just go there and experience it for yourself and be aware of what's happening to your body when you cross into this environment. You are crossing a threshold into a much finer environment. And science has now been able to prove that that is actually the case, that all of these temples are doing something for you and to you. And anybody in a state of grace, when they're walking inside a passage mound and sits there, and there's a quiet meditation, even for 5 minutes, you're away with the pharaohs. And I mean that literally, because it was the fair people. That's where the word fairy comes from. The fair people, it was this noble and divine bloodline, built these things for us originally to tell you that this is where X marks the spot. When you have lost your ability to connect with the world around you, with nature, with the finer level of reality, we built this big temple with big rocks so that you know where to go, because those rules exist in those environments. I think it's a very romantic way of doing it, and it's very true, because when you go into these portals, you are accessing a new level of reality. And under the right conditions, if you do it often enough as I do, on a yearly basis, you become a different person. You become aware of your own abilities. You connect with an astral reference library. People ask me, where do you get the information for your books from? I said, from going about walking with the fairies in sacred sites. I sit there and I just ask a question. What is this all about? Who am I? What am I doing here? And as I sit there, I take a sandwich or a glass of water and I listen to the birds or listen to the grass grow. And suddenly these images are popping into my head and I write these things down. And I thought, it'll be fantastic if I could prove this. Yeah, I spent years then going to a library and researching scientific documents or metaphysical documents or ancient traditions. And I bring them all together. And there's my answer to my question. And I publish it as a book. That's the way I do it. Some people use it for healing or for doing personal work, but that's what these temples do. They basically are marking these fine points on the face of the earth where the rules of science as we know them are subtly different, and we can access this information whenever we want.
So my question, a practical question, if a person is perhaps suspicious of themselves, of perhaps I am existing in some level of incoherence, and perhaps there is some level of distortion in my field. And if the person experiences, I think you know if you're feeling a little distorted. If you feel like your heart is expanding open, if you feel like, you tend to smile, a little bit more than the average American, if you tend to have like an optimistic lens on the world, if you have like a joyful, childlike excitement, you're probably more coherent. If you're not, there's a good chance there's a little bit of noise in your signal. What would be, from a practical lens, if you could suggest one tool or thing to do, suggestion, practice, something of the sort, to create more coherence, what would your recommendation for a person be?
Oh, discover who you are, and do whatever it takes to discover who you are. Even walking about in New York City, and I have American friends that laugh at me at this. Said, no, there's a place in the south part of Central Park, which is a terminal moraine, and it overlooks a lake. There's these enormous buildings at the end of Central Park. But if you stand on the terminal moraine and look at this rock outcrop above this lake, you'll see these scratches that were created by the glaciers scraping these rocks over what became Central Park. That is a portal in the middle of New York City. And if you just sit there for any amount of time, you suddenly feel that time has gone by, and it has. 2 hours have gone by, and you use that time to connect with the world of nature around you. That's all you need to do. Here where I live in Portland, Maine, there's a coffee shop, which is a very special coffee shop, which is built on an old Abenaki sacred site. I've done research on this, and I know the owner, and I asked her, was there a reason why you bought this building as opposed to all the other places where you could have had a coffee shop? Because I love sitting here, and especially over there by the window. And she goes, yeah, there's something about this building. I said, yeah, exactly. You were aware of it because she was already into this kind of work, and she chose the building because of the feel of what she felt, not because of the rent, not because of the location, but because of how she felt in there. And I said, yeah, it's sitting on a very interesting place that the Abenaki used to use as a gathering place because it made them feel good too. So that's a practical advice. You can go to places in cities today around the world, and suddenly, if you're not thinking and intellectualizing the process where your body takes you into a certain location, whether it's a park, whether it's a little outcrop of rock, whether it's a coffee shop, your body feels perfect. And I said, yeah, all the noise has suddenly shut down, and your body's trying to find a place where it can shut out the noise and feel whole. There's a word for that. It's called holy. You are wholly within yourself. You become whole because your body is seeking to find holiness with the environment, which gave it birth in the first place. So there are all these hot spots of energy everywhere on the planet. Some are stronger, some are bigger than others, and some are very subtle, and they're in the middle of a city. So even if you're in a city environment, as I am, you can still find these little hot spots where you can sit down and become attuned to the earth itself. And that's the best advice you can have. Or if you're lucky and you can travel around the world, as I am, you can go to sacred sites, and those are definitely marking these hotspots. And the idea is to make you more aware and attached to the bigger scheme of things, attached to your environment, because that's what it all comes down to. Understanding how the earth works, your place in the earth, and also using that natural connection to become aware that you can do incredible things, and you can shut out the noise as well.
Final question. What is the next biggest shift you see coming for human society?
Oh, the big shift. We're in the middle of it right now. There was a channeling that I remember very well 35 years ago, that humanity has been given the choice to evolve or go back to its old ways of doing things. Both are correct, by the way. I would rather use my incarnation to make things better. I want to leave the planet one day and say, I made the place 1% better. That was my contribution. And I'd like to see that in my lifetime. The shift is potentially around the corner. We just need to hit a critical mass. Okay. We're pretty close to it. It doesn't make the headlines because good news, if you've noticed, rarely makes the headlines. And I used to be in the media for 14 years. I can tell you, it's not a conspiracy. It's just that good news doesn't sell newspapers. It really doesn't. They tried that in the newspaper in Britain for about 25 years, dedicated itself to good news. It went out of business. People didn't want to hear about good news. We are addicted to conflict. Chaos sells because we have to look at conflict for survive as a survival tool. If we are aware of conflict, we learn how to survive or not. We fall into the conflict. So the big shift is about becoming aware that we're in the middle of a massive cyclical change that comes around like clockwork every few thousand years. And you either choose to accept the shift and ride the shift elegantly and be part of a movement to a new earth, or you basically fall by the wayside like a dinosaur. And that didn't work out too well for them either. So the potential is there. It just depends of who you are and your relationship to the awareness and the shift that's taking place. And whether you want to, and I'm going to quote, who was it? It was a famous actor. I forget his name now. He said, you can either make life chicken salad or chicken shit. It's your decision. And I thought it was Jeff Bridges. And he was joking, but he's actually quite true. And he said the same thing that the Yugas and any other sacred mystical teaching has said for 1,000 years. Your life is how you make it. Gandhi called it tending to your garden. How do you want your garden to be? Then do the garden. Be the change that you wish to see. And one neighbor will imitate that garden and one neighbor will try to burn it down. But at least you've influenced one person, and that's how the change and the shift will occur. One person being a light and lighting lots of other lights.
That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. It's actually very simple when it comes down to it. Just be the change that you wish to see, and we'll get through it. But the good news is, and this is from the watchers themselves, we're that far from hitting a critical mass. So don't despair. It's just do the work that you came here to do. Let things fall where they may.
Yeah, all beings are magicians. All beings are all things. But a part of that is you're a magician, and you can manifest and create your story as you choose. The only thing that blocks you from manifesting and creating your story as you choose is the inertia of your story.
Exactly.
And that's, I believe, the process of death and resurrection and rebirth and all of that stuff. There's probably some iteration of your persona dying. And then on the other side of that is the realization that you are that what you seek. You are all things. You, like everything that you're looking for, you actually, you're already there. The only thing blocking you from being there is your state of forgetting. And the meaning of religion is to remember.
Nicely said. Nicely said.
You're awesome, man. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're awesome too, Aaron. Thanks for
so the people, if they want to go deeper, your movie Megalith is out. I think that would probably be a cool place to go.
Yeah, you can see it on my website, or I'm going to talk about that at Gaia at the Ancient Civilizations Conference in 2 weeks. So
amazing.
Come around and I'll make myself available for a whole day. We'll come and discuss megaliths and the change of consciousness.
Right. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for tuning in. That's it. That's all. I'll see you next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, you might also enjoy this episode over here, as well as this one over here. Thank you for subscribing. Appreciate you. I'll see you in the next video.